Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for the Twitter space today. Happy to be here. I'm Xandra and I'm the community manager for CharmVerse. For those not familiar, CharmVerse is a Web3 community platform for managing members, coordinating tasks, facilitating decisions, and holding each other accountable. Members can sign in with crypto wallets and gain access via community tokens and NFTs, and it brings together onboarding, payment management, proposals, project trackers, and data repositories all in one place. So today we're chatting with Evin from Disco.xyz. Super excited to have her as a guest today. Hi, Evin. Thanks for joining me.
GM, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to share a little bit more about our work here at Disco. It's so fantastic to see some familiar faces and some new friends here. So let's get into it.
I love it. And so this is a big topic to unpack. And I know I have a lot to learn. So I'm super excited to be talking with you, who I definitely consider a leader in this space. And I'm sure we all have a lot to learn about identity and privacy and Web3 and what you're doing at Disco. So first, why Disco? What's the name behind it?
So our team is called Disco because we believe that you are the multifaceted center of the party just as you are. And you should reflect your data and your identity to the world through your many different facets, however you decide. You go by many different names in the world, your Ethereum address, your Twitter handle right here, your email address, your government name, a Bitcoin address, a Tron address, etc. And all of these different names reflect different parts of yourself, different facets of your identity. So just like a disco ball, you're the same person, regardless, the same party, the same entity, regardless of which facet of you is reflecting forward. And so we really carry that metaphor through our practice at Disco, thinking about the atomic unit of Web3 as a human being, that smallest unit that we want to gather data around, that's, of things that are not assets. These are individual human beings because we're building human coordination tools. So at Disco, we think about your identity not just as a single address, a single name that you go by, but rather your ability to control and compel all those many different names and the data that might describe them.
I love that. That's a great breakdown and also a great story behind the name. So a little backstory on you. How did you land in Web3 and what made you gravitate towards the topic of identity?
So, a little over 10 years ago, when I was an undergrad, I was really excited about free and open source software, Creative Commons licenses, and the legal wrappers we can use to make data more free. And it was around that time that I had the absolute best professor in the universe ever, this woman named Elizabeth Stark, who in years since, being a professor, has gone on to found Lightning Labs, which is a payments network on top of Bitcoin. But at the time, she was my super cool computer science professor and introduced to me the idea of censorship resistant networks, starting with Bitcoin. So for me, Web3 was just Bitcoin for a very long time until I started to learn about the development of other ecosystems like Ethereum that had cool things like smart contracts. And so for me, I feel very fortunate because I never got the memo that Web3 and decentralized technologies weren't a space for a young woman like me. Because, the very first builders and thinkers that I met in this space had a lot of very similar qualities that I did, many similar experiences and interests. And so what led me to identity was actually first a curiosity about how we show up in different spaces. So I wrote my undergraduate thesis on how we decide what parts of ourselves to share in places like World of Warcraft, on Twitter. Instagram was just starting up, but more looking at things like even chat roulette and Facebook. And so as I realized that we have to deliberately decide and then manually type in the parts of ourselves we want to share in different environments, I realized we don't have a whole lot of control about how we're showing up. And so instead, I thought, wouldn't it be so useful if we had a reusable copy of our data, kind of like an autofill for everything that could help applications and services and even physical spaces react to our preferences and give us a personalized adventure that we don't necessarily have to manually curate every single time we open a new app or we interact with a new service.
Amazing. That sounds fantastic and gets me even more excited to dive into this conversation. So let's back it up to Web 2 for a minute, because I know that there's so much information being collected about us as individuals every time we do go into those apps and do type something into a search engine. So what starts to change about identity and data collection when we go from Web 2 to Web 3?
So the goal for Disco is that you never fill out a form again. Right now, the first time that you interact with a new app, often what you're met with is a big form to fill out with your email address, maybe your wallet address, a profile picture, a bio, linked accounts, various traits about you, etc. And we think that that labor of onboarding is exhausting. I know if any of you all have ever been to a crypto conference week, you'll know that Eventbrite after Partyful after Luma RSVP asks you for the same information over and over again. And so our objective is that, one of the very first ways that we can help ease the challenge of moving from one space to another, enabled by our Web3 keys, is to have onboarding data that is reusable so that when we interact with an app for the first time or the 100th time, we're able to, dictate a more personalized experience based on the parts of ourselves that we choose to share. So whether that is our preference for light or dark mode, primary language, our preferred pronouns, or even memberships that we have to DAOs or communities, we can carry around in our data backpacks reusable pieces of this information so that just like Google can allow us to autofill forms in their own ecosystem, we can start to autofill those initial experiences in any space.
That just resonated with me because I just signed up for a bunch of events at ETH Denver and went through that entire situation you just outlined with filling out the same information form after form after form on Eventbrite. So this solution sounds great. So there are other projects, shilling identity solutions. So what are some issues you see with current solutions out there? And then we can dig into Disco and how you're planning to resolve some of these issues and offer better solutions.
So as Disco, we feel really fortunate to be standing on the shoulders of many giants. As you note, there have been a lot of experiments in the identity space that have sought to allow folks to own and control more than just their money, which, we figured out how to do pretty well using on-chain assets and our crypto wallets. Some of the sort of early conjectures about how identity would work that didn't work so well, but actually allowed us to learn a lot, include projects that charged users for their own existence. So, you've had your own identity since the day you were born, and you didn't have to pay anybody for that. And so we believe that charging individuals for their own existence is unethical. But rather, we see an opportunity to generate revenue on the sides of enterprises and applications that are benefiting from having reusable data and greater efficiency. Some other challenges that we've seen in the identity space include arduous technical complexity and publishing too much on chain. So obviously, as we know, we only want to share certain parts of ourselves in certain environments. And so when we put data in clear text in an unencrypted form on a blockchain, that means we're making it accessible to everyone on Earth and in space with an internet connection for basically all time. And so if your data doesn't require that amount of availability, if you're not expecting 24/7 access to it from parties all over the planet, maybe even in outer space for eons to come, you're probably going to make sharing that data on chain an expensive overshare because it's not going to require that amount of publicity and not going to require that amount of persistence. Additionally, if we publish data on a specific blockchain, we're making it opinionated, such that it is easily accessible inside of that blockchain's ecosystem, but it's going to require a lot more effort and complexity for us to take it somewhere else. So, for example, if we publish data on the Ethereum blockchain, but we want to use it in a Bitcoin-based interaction, we might find ourselves in a bit of a pickle. So instead, when we at Disco think about data, we want to make sure that that is stored in the most useful form to you as an individual. So it can do the most things for you. You can employ it in the most spaces to remove the most friction from the most kinds of environments. And that means storing data in a form that can be read by more than just the keys from the Bitcoin or blockchain ecosystem, rather, that you're coming from, but rather can be read by more than 150 different kinds of keys. Can be resolved by anybody with an internet connection without needing to publicize that data to such a large global persistent audience. So, we've got a whole lot of different learnings. Happy to jump into some more, but also happy to talk about a little bit more about how we're doing this at the Disco.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So you're not storing this information on the blockchain.
That is correct. We believe that unless your data requires global public availability forever, you don't actually need to store it on a blockchain. So instead, with Disco, your data, the credentials you carry around in your data backpack, kind of like a digital form of those plastic identification cards in your wallet, those are stored off chain. They're encrypted against your keys so that you own and control them, that you can pull them up and share them whenever you need to with applications across chains, regardless of whether they're Web 2 or Web 3 or what blockchain they're built on. And then also, Disco has recently, in partnership with our friends at District Labs, pioneered a very cool way to present your off-chain credentials to a smart contract while maintaining your privacy. So today, if you want to try that out, you can get set up with your data backpack. Just go to the Disco XYZ Twitter handle and you can see our sign up form there. And then you can onboard, receive your Disco Not credential in your data backpack, and then carry that over to some smart contracts on Polygon or Ethereum to mint an NFT available only to holders of that particular credential. So this is the basis for which we're excited to have on-chain logic gated by credentials in the near future for things like permissioned DeFi pools that require proofs of KYC in order to interact with the contract.
So you just mentioned data backpack. What do you mean by that?
Yes, so at Disco, we are so excited to extend the capabilities of your existing wallet keys to encompass more data than is just your financial information represented by your tokens. So, in the same way that in the real world, you can take your wallet full of your financial information and throw it into your backpack full of all the other stuff you need for your adventures and carry that around from one space to another, similarly at Disco, we allow you to extend the capabilities of your Web3 wallet so that you can own and control all kinds of data about you and carry that with you from app to app.
So it's an app. All of my credentials are being stored in this app that I'm then carrying around with me, whether it's on my phone or whatever.
Yeah, so your credentials are, you can use the Disco web app to interact with your credentials, to issue them to others, to take custody of ones that people have sent to you, mark them as public or private. And the nice thing about the Disco web app is that your credentials are actually not stored in the app, but are rather stored under the ownership and control of your keys. Right now, we have our data stored on the Ceramic network. We're excited to integrate a variety of storage providers so that your data can live where you want it to. You can pick it up and move it if you need to, but no matter what, it's going to be easily accessible to you no matter where you need it and not accessible to anyone else, meaning that is not going to be publicized unless you consent.
So all of these are stored, but they remain private. I still own them, and I can share them whenever and however I choose.
Precisely. So, one really exciting thing about public key cryptography, or the superpowers that are enabled with our wallets, is that we can use our blockchain keys and the wallets that we use to interact with them. We can use those tools to do more than own and control on-chain assets. Our keys are almost like a personal notary stamp where we can write notes to other users and sign them so that it's clear that they came from us, that other parties can interact with them, rely upon them, smart contracts can read them, but they don't need to go on chain.
So interesting because I think people think decentralization, they automatically think blockchain, right? Like everything has to live there. So this is blowing my mind a little bit.
So it's a really important word that you bring up here, decentralization. Because, for example, if we take a bunch of data and we publish it on a specific blockchain, that data is centralized to that blockchain. That data is going to be difficult to move or utilize in another context or might require some additional technical complexity. So at Disco, when we think about decentralization, we think about that core unit of decentralization as a person, entity, or organization that can have its own data backpack. So that when we decentralize data, we logically centralize it around its subject, around the party that owns and controls it, that data is written about, so that that decentralized self-sovereign person can choose where their data goes, can pick it up and move it, and doesn't need to be bound to any centralized platform or ecosystem.
Sounds so easy. Go ahead.
It's it feels pretty straightforward, right? What if we can own more than our money? What if we are more than our wallets? How might we treat those pieces of information about ourselves like they are assets that we can carry with us that can unlock things? And quite functionally, that's how the world works today already in Web 2. We already have cookies attached to our browsers that personalize the experiences we have with a variety of apps. We just don't have the ability to see those, to control them, to decide how they're shared, or to even understand when they're being stuck to us.
Right. So let's break it down into maybe a few examples of like real life context, right? So let's say I'm going to ETH Denver and I have my data backpack and I'm using it to get into certain events. How is that then stored, and what would it look like in 5 or 10 years from now, potentially?
So at ETH Denver this year, you'll be able to come visit the Disco Lounge with your data backpack. So what that will look like is that you will walk into the doors of our cozy and sparkly space. You'll pull up your MetaMask or other Ethereum compatible wallet and pull up app.disco.xyz and then be able to show us the credentials in your data backpack. A member of the Disco team will be able to scan one of the QR codes associated with one of your credentials in your backpack to show that you indeed are a Disco user, and then we'll welcome you into the space. Now, if you have some other credentials in your data backpack, such as if you've collected 10 GM credentials, which are kind of like Facebook style pokes that get sent from other users, if you collect 10 of those, a Disco team member will be able to validate those credentials right on site using your mobile device and will be able to give you some awesome swag. If we don't have the item that you're looking for in store, you'll be able to visit our Shopify store. Connect your wallet with one click as you would normally a Web3 dApp. And then based on the data in your backpack, you'll be able to shop for free Disco items. Additionally, we're also really excited to be working with groups like Boys Club to allow credential unlocked access to their event ticketing. So in the same way that you can use a token for access control to physical spaces, applications, and smart contracts, you can also use a verifiable credential carried in your data backpack in all of those different places.
Very cool. So first of all, I need to make sure that I'm signing up for disco.xyz along with any other listener that is definitely going to be at ETH Denver. And then definitely come to the disco.xyz lounge and come visit you in person, because I would love to say hi and see you IRL. What about if we're talking about, let's say CharmVerse is an example. CharmVerse just released a forum feature. So say I'm on there, I'm making posts within my community, contributing valuable content, getting a ton of upvotes. It's a Web3 enabled app. Could that be tracked to my identity?
Immediately, yes. So we at Disco are huge fans of CharmVerse and are really excited about all of the ways that we can help folks document proofs of their non-financial contributions to their communities and be able to carry those around almost like a Web3 resume, receipts of a job well done, all the way granularly down to the individual forum post. So already we're working with friends like Guild to be able to automatically issue credentials to folks who attend 80% or more of a Twitter space or Discord stage, just like everybody here today, as well as being able to issue credentials automatically to those who speak in such events. So there's absolutely no reason that something like an upvote, a forum post, rigorously providing feedback on a proposal in a DAO, all of these different actions can and should be able to be received and collected by the people doing them. So when we think about the future of work in Web3 and DAOs, right now the switching costs are quite high. If I want to go join a new DAO, it's like it's my first day on the internet when I join that Discord channel, and I've got to farm my reputation and prove that I am a worthy contributor. But what if I could carry with me to my CharmVerse interactions proofs of the DAOs that I am a member of in good standing? So today, for example, when I connect my wallet to CharmVerse, CharmVerse could ping the Disco API and then display my Boys Club credential to show that I'm an active member of that community and to signal to other folks that kind of membership. So especially for DAOs and organizations for whom public resellable tokens are not an appropriate way to count who's in their community, this provides a really awesome additional layer that we can use by itself or in conjunction with tokens, not only to identify who's contributing, who's a member, but also to weight things like token holdings. So right now, we're also excited to be working on a plugin for Snapshot that will allow you to weight your community's votes in accordance with not just their token holdings, but also the off-chain credentials that represent things like their participation in your community or their subject matter expertise.
And this is really all just happening with your wallet. So I sign up for Disco.xyz today. It's connected to my wallet. I go into my CharmVerse, and those two are going to speak to each other.
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. We've been really excited to be, chatting with some folks on the CharmVerse side, and we think that being able to bring a fuller picture of DAO contributors, not just their financial contributions, but the way that they show up at events, contributing to the newsletter, participating in events and conversations just like this one today, are all worthy of recognition and valuable pieces of information that we can use to describe how we show up in our communities.
Amazing. Yeah. So CharmVerse already has this member directory where you can see some of the contributions of members within your community. But this sounds like it would just really round it all out with, like you said, events and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, the sort of rounding it out is a really great phrase here, because when we think about how we show up in a community, we are more than just the commits we push on GitHub, right? We bring immaculate vibes. We welcome new members. We show up at events. We rep the merch. And all of these different actions contribute to the way that we feel a sense of belonging. When we think about, public goods and shared objectives, one really cool thing about community here is that if we are able to reflect upon our own contributions toward a shared goal, we have a greater shared sense of identity. And from that shared sense of identity comes community accountability, it comes stronger DAOs, and a clearer way forward for everybody.
Evin, I love the passion you speak about identity with, because it can be, like I said, it can be a hefty topic and you can read about it. It could be very confusing. And the way you break it down just makes it so much easier to understand.
Oh my gosh, you are so kind. Well, I think, one really wonderful thing about identity is that everybody has one. In fact, all of us have had our identities our whole lives since the day we were born. And so no one will ever be more expert in being you than you. No one will ever be able to get more value from the data that describes you than you will. And so when we think about identity, not as the thing, but it's the thing that gets us to the thing. It's the set of characteristics and traits and features that enable and unlock and personalize our experiences. So identity really is the layer that we use to interface with the whole world. And so when we talk about identity in Web3, what we're really doing is just trying to translate some of the traits and experiences that we already enjoy every day without even having to try into tools that can communicate with our smart contracts.
I also like how you're talking about identity, because I feel like people that are skeptics of Web3 aren't really thinking about that, or they're not thinking about the humans behind it necessarily. But if you're in Web3, there's so much collaboration, and really we're looking to protect people. Like you said, Web2, you're collecting so much data about me that you're kind of creating what you think I am as a person based on searches or likes or anything like that, right? Where now I have more control of my data and who I am presenting myself as.
Absolutely. I actually think it's kind of funny that there's so much skepticism around Web3 because people think of crypto as only cryptocurrency. But really, crypto, is often and I think more frequently used to refer to cryptography, or the underlying technologies that make cryptocurrency possible, where cryptocurrencies are just one of the many use cases that we can unlock using public ledgers and private keys. And so, the sort of discussion of like, well, will Web3 become illegal? Like, fortunately for all of us, you can't outlaw math. And so when we think about the universe of possibility, when we can truly own things and carry them with us from one space to another, we can get so much value out of more than just our financial expression. I like to quote this movie Fight Club a lot, where this character, Tyler Durden, says, "You are more than the contents of your wallet." And right now in Web3, you cannot be more than the contents of your wallet. And so it is imperative, upon all of us in this conversation here today, to remember that we are whole, complete, multifaceted people, and we deserve the right to bring our whole selves to any interaction that we choose. But, to your point, we have to remain very human about this. We are building human coordination tools, emphasis on the human. And as much as we like to talk about trust minimized systems, there's a whole lot of trust that goes into a blockchain. We don't necessarily know who's sitting behind the keys, although identity solutions will help us improve that ability. But at the end of the day, we're still trusting that folks running beacon chain nodes are going to be updating their clients, that they're going to be paying their electricity bills, and that we're going to be able to continue working together as a community and ecosystem. So to deny the humanity of trust minimized systems is to deny the way that they are architected in the beginning.
So because you're so good at breaking this stuff down, can I throw some acronyms at you and have you break them down? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that gets confused by some of these terms. But I have a feeling you might be able to help us kind of break it down into layman terms.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, perfect. So if you're looking into identity at all, something you're going to see is DIDs or DIDs, if that's how they say it. And it stands for decentralized identifiers. What does this mean?
That is a great question. So DIDs or decentralized identifiers are kind of like a self-owned link tree. It's a name that you go by and a set of directions for how to interact with that name, something called a DID document. So the way that we get our DIDs, are these names that we can use to tell people how to interact with us, is that we take an identifier that we already have, such as an Ethereum address, a Bitcoin address, a website, an email address, a PGP key. There are more than 150 different kinds. But we'll take that, let's say, Ethereum address, and we're going to retrofit it to give it some new superpowers. So a DID method, that's basically how you go about retrofitting your existing identifier so that it can carry data around and have those directions for how to interact with you. Basically, what we do is we take our Ethereum address, we add a few characters to the front of it, and then we're going to be able to generate those additional superpowers, a new set of signing keys. But essentially what this means is that you can take your Ethereum address and your wallet and build it out into a data backpack that can own and control information about you and can let other people know how you can receive credentials in your backpack that they want to write to you. So a decentralized identifier, or a DID, is what we call your data backpack, or the name or address that people can send data to you so that you can accept it with your keys, own and control it, and carry it around. So sort of in summary, when we say DID or decentralized identifier, we mean the data backpack that you've built using a set of keys that already existed for some other reason.
Okay, see, you're great at this. Yeah, so that makes sense. I wasn't sure if the DID lived in the backpack, but the DID is the backpack.
Exactly. Your DID is your backpack. It's, another way to think about it is it's like an alias for your existing Ethereum address or other public address that allows you to receive credentials using the very same keys.
And so my ENS as is not my DID. Instead, Disco is going to help me by modifying that.
That's correct. So your ENS address is an NFT that you have purchased and mapped to your public key. So anybody can buy any ENS address that they want. So for example, for a while, I owned GabriellaHurst.eth. I am not Gabriella Hurst, the creative director of the fashion brand Chloe, but because anybody can buy these assets, I was able to obtain that. Similarly, in ENS profiles, these are kind of like little forms that you fill out to associate stuff that you want to your ENS. You can associate your Twitter handle, but that's just a one-way self-attested text record. So I could write that my Twitter handle is @ParisHilton on my ENS address, and nobody can stop me. This is similar to the way that on Twitter, you can write your ENS handle as your display name, but anybody can write your ENS handle as their display name. And so ENS is pretty low assurance because it doesn't actually tell us very much about how that NFT came to be mapped to your public key, or whether or not the associated names that you're showing off, with that ENS are indeed yours. At Disco, the way that your data backpack works is that you are able to associate your Twitter account, your Discord handle, your website with kind of a handshake, so that your Twitter account says, yes, this is my data backpack. And your data backpack also has to say, yes, this is my Twitter handle. So in this way, when you have a link between your data backpack and your Twitter handle, your Discord handle, your website, you own and control those links. Disto does not. You can decide that you want to share those links with anybody to prove that you own both the data backpack and the associated social handle, and Disco cannot stop you from doing so. So in this way, the link between your Twitter handle and your keys is much more self-sovereign and independent than, for example, the link that OpenSea owns that exists between your Twitter handle and the keys that you might use to mint NFTs on their platform.
Do you ever, I know you speak at a lot of conferences, but do you ever speak at universities about identity?
Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite things to do. Because I was such a fortunate student all those years ago to have an amazing professor who taught me about many of these fundamental concepts, it's really important for me to spend as much time as I can with folks in university and learning settings, being able to share this message with them just as I received it. So recently, I was really proud to be able to contribute to Columbia Law School's privacy and cybersecurity seminars. Really excited to be speaking at University of Pennsylvania next week, and just got off the phone with some of my friends from my own alma mater at Yale University, where we're excited to help the blockchain club get up and running with membership credentials of their own. So of course, universities are often a great place, a sandbox for us to try new tools, and we've seen a ton of appetite from builders at the collegiate level to extend what's possible in Web3 and to start bringing more fun kinds of data to the party. And also, I think, the university level, but also just generally, this is really where Disco shines because we bring the fun. We can't have a lot of fun together if the only thing I know about you is how much money you have. But if I know what communities you're part of, where I'm accountable, I know the kind of music you like, my favorite color, and suddenly we have a lot more in common and we can start playing much more interesting coordination games than just being a group chat with a bank account.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so glad I'm learning all of this from you because, like I said, you make it very digestible. And I was going to say, if you're not speaking at universities, you should be because you are a fantastic teacher.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, if anybody here is from the university ecosystem and is interested in welcoming their students to the Disco, or you want to issue credentials for your class or your course, please let me know. That's something that we're really excited about working on with a number of educational institutions right now. And also, it's really cool because so many universities around the world have already started working on issuing credentials as diplomas and course completions from Harvard to the University of Oxford, University of Georgia, and everybody in between. So it's a really exciting time to be thinking about learning credentials and the way that we can prove our aptitude in the future.
Absolutely. Okay, another one I have for you. VCs. So verifiable credentials is another word you'll hear floating around out there a lot.
That is a great one. So VC often means venture capital in the tech space. But if we get into the identity nerd universe, we're going to hear about verifiable credentials. Similar to decentralized identifiers, verifiable credentials are a technical specification that was created by the World Wide Web Consortium, or the W3C. The W3C, these are the folks who run the internet. So it's run by Tim Berners-Lee, the godfather of the modern internet, and they helped to popularize things like TCP/IP and HTTPS back in the day to help different networks talk to each other. So with all of these different blockchain networks that don't really talk to each other very well or have to use things like bridges, the W3C has come to save the day and give us a common language of data where we can allow a Bitcoin address to talk to an email address, to talk to a PGP key, to talk to an Ethereum address, all being on the same page at the same time. So a verifiable credential is kind of like an off-chain NFT. It is a self-contained piece of data that's a statement written by one party about another party and signed with the writer's keys. So this statement is what we call an attestation. You can write it about yourself. You can write it about someone else. And that statement is tamper-proof because it's signed with your keys. It's encrypted. It can be set to expire or revoked. And so it's a little bit more flexible than on-chain data that is persistent. A verifiable credential, because it is written about you, kind of like a diploma, is not transferable. So if I receive a verifiable credential saying that I spoke in this Twitter space, I can't hand it to Alex Poon and suddenly he looks like he spoke in this Twitter space. So in this way, credentials that are written about you are natively non-transferable. As I mentioned, they are globally resolvable and have high availability. And so what this means is that if you bring a credential to any app or interaction, the person that you're party that you're interacting with is going to be able to engage with and resolve that credential to see, is the cryptography intact? Has it been modified? Who was it signed by? And what does it say? So the nice thing about verifiable credentials is they allow us to use our existing signing keys to pass notes with different people using many different kinds of keys at the speed of an API and without the need for any kind of gas or transaction fees. So it is free to create a verifiable credential in the same way that it's basically free to create a PDF. So with the same cost and energy consumption of moving an NFT from one wallet to another, you could create more than 1 billion credentials.
Do my VCs live in my data backpack?
Yes, great question. So your verifiable credentials are files, just like PDFs. So they take up space and they've got to go somewhere to sleep at night. So right now, when you receive a credential in your data backpack, it's going to be encrypted against your keys, so only you can open it, and it is going to be stored on the Ceramic network, which is a decentralized storage solution, kind of like a DevX layer on top of IPFS, built by our friends over at 3Box Labs. As Disco grows in the coming weeks and months, we're excited to integrate many other storage solutions so that you could pop your data into Disco storage. You could use decentralized web nodes from Web 5, or in the very near future, you could store your data on something like Kepler from Spruce ID. So we think it's really important that your data is not bound or trapped in any single storage solution, but rather you can hook up whatever storage makes sense to your data backpack so that you can see and manage your credentials with ease. Something that's also particularly fun about verifiable credentials is that we can use them for access control to all the same spaces that we use tokens. So we can use a credential for access control to e-commerce discounts, for applications, chat channels like Telegram and Discord, GitHub repositories, Google Drive collaboration tools, and even smart contracts. So you can use credentials. You can require that someone have the right off-chain credentials in order to interact with your smart contract. So let's say maybe someone needs to have attended 5 Twitter spaces and have credentials to prove that in order to mint an NFT, or that someone needs to have a KYC credential from a trusted issuer in order to deposit into a permissioned DeFi pool.
Okay, yeah, you're making it all come together. Learning about identity is fun, from Evin. Okay, one more. I see this a lot too. ZK proofs.
That is a great buzzword. So ZK proofs, or zero knowledge proofs, are a superpower that allows us to learn something about data without seeing it. So to compute upon a black box of information without opening it up and learn something about that information. My very favorite example of how a ZK proof can work comes from this professor at Harvard, Larry Lessig, who first popularized this particular example in the 1990s when I was still in elementary school. But it's stuck with me ever since. So today in the United States, if you visit a bar or establishment that serves alcohol, you'll probably have to show them your driver's license or passport to prove that you're over the age of 21. But the bouncer at that establishment doesn't need to see the street that you live on, your eye color, your weight, your hair color. All they need to know is that you are of age to enter the establishment. And so in the future, you can imagine going to a bar and presenting your ID in an app that uses a zero knowledge proof to share information. So instead of showing that whole ID, instead the bouncer just scans a QR code with their device and then gets a thumbs up or a thumbs down, a green check mark or a red X, so that we can change the question from what is your data, what year were you born, what day were you born, to does your data fit my requirements? Have you presented the credentials required to enter this establishment? So in this way, we can still, enjoy quite a lot of personalization, but we don't necessarily need to reveal all of the data that describes us. So there are some really awesome teams in the Web3 ecosystem, such as the Aztec team, that's developing a special language called Noir that will allow us to, in a very efficient way, use zero knowledge proofs to do exactly what I described, to learn something about someone's data without seeing a plain copy of it or having the opportunity to even make a copy of it.
Thank you. And I apologize for turning you into a human dictionary for all of us. But like I said, it can be a lofty topic, and it definitely helps to just hear it in your words.
No, not at all. I think that translation is one of the most important things that we can do in Web3 because we need to speak the language of the rest of the world, not just of the niche protocol fetishists who love to read documentation on their weekends like you and me. And so, I'm particularly excited about the very near future when we can stop talking about DIDs and VCs and underlying protocols. We're having a really wonderful conversation here today, and at no point has anyone talked about VoIP, voice over IP, or any underlying protocol that's making this Twitter space happen. We're just using an app and hanging out with one another. And I think that's where we need to move with decentralized technologies. We have to stop talking about the function of the underlying protocol, and we need to build things that do stuff where you don't have to talk about, the functions of the technology underneath to enjoy a great experience. And so I'm excited for the day when we can stop calling them verifiable credentials and refer to them as tickets, recommendations, diplomas, and membership cards.
That's so true. 100% agree with you. I think a lot of these acronyms and jargon and all that stuff that's floating around there makes it hard for some people to get into Web3 because they just feel like they're stepping into a whole new language, a whole new world, and it's just very daunting. So breaking something down by saying it's a ticket or an NFT is a membership badge, it makes it so much more relatable and digestible and approachable.
It's kind of funny that there is an economic disincentive for us to welcome as many people as we can to Web3. A yield farm doesn't work with 1 billion people for very long. And so we have this funny set of dynamics where there are financial incentives for us to keep our circle small and to maintain, a set of jargon and language that excludes others. But if we really want to unleash the possibilities of Web3 and to really enjoy the network effects that are possible with these underlying technologies, we need to look outside of our own bubble and to the rest of the world that looks at us as a rounding error. There are on average like fewer than 300,000 Ethereum wallets that interact with the Ethereum blockchain every day. And there are hundreds of millions of users on Twitter, this platform where we're gathering right now. And so if we want to, flip those numbers, we want to make them a little bit more equal, bring them closer to parity, we need to use language that people can understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So share with us I know we're running short on time, but share with us how you wrapped up 2022 with Disco and what you're looking to do in 2023.
So at the end of the year, we were so excited to start launching our first membership credentials. So right now, we are in the thick of welcoming communities of all shapes and sizes to Disco to allow them to issue credentials of membership in good standing to their communities, who can then use those membership credentials to access Google collaboration tools, GitHub repos, discounts in e-commerce, chat channels, and a whole bunch more. So as we look to the future, we are very excited in the coming weeks to start releasing even more capabilities for these communities. We've also just started rolling out guest speaker credentials. So for podcast hosts and Twitter space hosts such as yourselves, we've started helping folks issue credentials to all of their guest speakers so that they have a verifiable proof of their participation. So these will feed into Web3 resumes, into future speaker applications for conferences, and even requests for podcasts and Twitter spaces just like this. So we're particularly excited about getting as many folks with data backpacks as we can and starting to show them that there's a new primitive in town and we're not just limited in Web3 to tokens anymore.
I love that you're incorporating these Web 2 apps, kind of bringing them into Web 3 and can still form our identity through them. It just makes that onboarding that much easier into Web 3.
Definitely. Well, and when we think about the data that describes us as people, 99.9% of that data lives in Web 2. And most of the places that we interact, most of the spaces where we hang out on a regular basis are Web 2 based. In fact, I would, challenge anybody on this call to tell me about a non-financial Web 3 app that you have used 3 days this week. And so in order for us to, build a bigger tent and to welcome even more users into our ecosystem, we need to think about what those kinds of non-financial use cases are. And we need to make these kinds of adventures accessible to everybody.
Absolutely. I will point out CharmVerse is free. I use it every day.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Outstanding. Actually, yes. This is a wonderful example of just how, specific our everyday experiences in Web3 are right now. Now, if we can imagine like our ability to carry more different kinds of contributions to communities, the ability to bring that from one space to another, imagine how much more robust our CharmVerse profiles could be and how many different kinds of interactions we could find with one another if we just had a little bit more data.
So I was going to ask, you've pretty much answered it, but I was wondering if because you're so focused on the Web3 identity, you're on that train, if you're backing off of using Web2 apps because of all that data collection.
So, one really interesting thing that we've seen from a regulatory perspective is that a lot of Web2 apps are really hype on data backpacks because the cost and complexity of storing so much user data is becoming insurmountable for small and medium-sized businesses. Now, of course, folks like Facebook are not going to, invert the internet tomorrow and quit selling display ads, but organizations, for example, like Goop, Gwyneth Paltrow's empire, thinks a lot about what it means to collect, and manage and store and secure and ensure user data. And so for businesses, of that scale, it could actually be very advantageous, even, help them save money to not have to rent space for that data to live, to ensure it, to protect it, and to make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Um, Right now, of course, Disco is a bring your own keys experience. And so we're only able to serve those folks who already manage their own private keys and already have their own wallets. In order for us to serve broader groups of folks that aren't yet in our ecosystem, we need to have custodial data backpacks. So allowing people to start off with something like a username and password, and then allow them to rotate the keys behind their data backpack and take custody of their very own private keys, kind of get in the driver's seat and take off the training wheels when they're ready. So one of the unique traits of decentralized identifiers, of those DIDs we were talking about earlier, is that you can rotate the keys if you lose them or they become compromised, or for whatever reason you want to be able to create a new set of keys. And so this ability will allow Disco to offer a custodial username and password experience that you can upgrade to hold your very own private keys when you're ready. And then eventually you can link your bank account and fund your wallet at that point. So we're thinking a lot about what progressive decentralization means for folks who don't know or quite frankly care about Web3, where they're just looking for some more efficiency in their experiences and a way to fill out fewer forms. So we're very excited to have a whole host of sort of varying size partners in the Web2 ecosystem who can help folks take custody of the vital data that already exists and describes them, from KYC credentials to proof of residency, proofs of compliance, employment, even things like a cleared credential for those who participate in CLEAR, the traveling program in the United States.
I feel like everything you're doing is going to make it so much easier to onboard people and give them trust and just start operating in Web3.
That is absolutely our goal. We don't want you staring at the nightmare rectangle for more minutes a day. We want to get you off the screen and into your adventure. And so we see your ability to bring your data backpack to all kinds of different interactions as the end of onboarding. So that instead of having to type out your email address another time into a party invitation, you can simply know that you are on the guest list based on the qualifications that you already have.
Evin, thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I would love if you have any kind of last shout outs about Disco for our listeners to give them to us now.
This has been so much fun. Thank you guys so much for having me today. And I cannot wait to welcome all of you to the Disco. If you're excited to try out Disco Private Beta, you can sign up for a VIP early access backpack. Just look at the pinned tweet on the Disco.xyz Twitter account. You can always visit us and share your metaverse dreams at disco.xyz. And if you have any other questions, my DMs are open and you can find me at Proven Authority here on Twitter.
Thanks again, Evin. I really do think you are going to help onboard so many people to Web3. I love how you said it. You're going to help people get off of their screen and into their adventures. I love that. That resonates with me. Listeners, please click Evin's PFP, give her a follow, go to @disco.xyz, give Disco a follow. And as she already stated, disco.xyz is the website where you can go and sign up for that beta. Thank you again. You are a fantastic teacher. I learned so much about identity today. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I really appreciate you lending us so much of your time.
Thank you guys so much. It has been an absolute delight to hang out with you all today, and I will see you in the metaverse.
I will see you in Denver. I'll be coming with my backpack and visiting.
Yahoo! I can't wait.
Well, have a great rest of your day. Listeners, thanks for joining us, and go check out Disco.xyz. Thanks, Evin. I'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.